Okay, so I'm just going to show you, showing you really quickly our Blackboard tab. If you go to the syllabus, or it's in course documents as well, either one, there's an updated syllabus here. I know there were questions about how the weights were going to shake out, because now that things have changed online, we're going to have fewer tests and fewer quizzes, and so I promised I would shift around the weights in a more equitable way. That's the goal here. And so if you notice down here in the syllabus, the old weights are shown right here, and I'm just updating you with new weights here. And so all I sort of decided to do in the long run here was shift some weights from the quizzes, because we're not going to have as many quizzes anymore, right? So we're only going to have like however many we had, 7 or something instead of 15. And so I just shifted that over to the final. Mostly that was out of respect to people who didn't have a great quiz grade. And I know there was some concern about this policy last time, but I think I would like to stick with this passing the final to pass the course. If everyone has a real problem with that, I would still like to talk to you about that. I know I had said that I was willing to talk to you last time. I'm not sure if people want to sort of broach that topic here. I'm happy to talk to you one-on-one, but I think that's a fairly common and somewhat fair thing to do given our circumstances. And I don't think it's going to be a problem for anyone. The main point of doing that is to encourage people to learn the material and not just sort of completely cut off from what we're doing here. Having said that, I think everyone got the policy, the email of the new policy, and you're welcome in probably most cases to take the class in a pass-fail, satisfactory/unsatisfactory way. I think I mentioned that in the last class, but I'm just going to bring it up one more time. And I'd like to clarify what that means for anyone who is confused about what that means. So basically, assuming it applies to you, which I think it probably does in most cases, the reason it wouldn't apply is if you're trying to get into some class that requires you to get a certain GPA in pre-calc, then you would need to get a grade. So for example, there are some classes that might say, well, in order to get into this class, you need to get a 2.0 in pre-calc. In those cases, you need to get a grade in order to pass and move on to the next step. If you're not in one of those situations, which most people probably aren't, you can probably shift the class to pass-fail if you wanted to. And so what that means is if you didn't want to, you can just keep taking the course like normal. I assign grades like normal at the end, and then you'll get a grade between 0 and 4.0, and it impacts your GPA. And if you're doing well in the course and you think you might get an A, for example, you should take the grade, in my opinion, because it'll help your GPA. If you're not interested in taking a grade, then what would happen is at the end of the course, I still submit a grade, so I still submit something between 0 and 4.0, and then as long as you get more than a 1.0, so as long as you pass, which is 60%, you would just get a pass. So you would get 3 credits towards your total requirements. It'll say in your transcript that you took pre-calculus, but you just don't get a grade, and so it doesn't impact your GPA, assuming you pass. Even if you fail, it wouldn't impact your GPA, but if you failed, you just wouldn't get credit for the course, and you would have to retake the course. Okay, are there questions about any of that stuff? Either anything about the syllabus, the changes in the weights, or the pass-fail policy, or anything that folks want to talk about? Feel free to either unmute yourself and chime in, or you can send something over in the chat. Something's on your mind.
I came in a little bit late. Would it be okay if after class and after we're done here, I talk to you a little bit about what I missed?
Sure. Yeah. If you want to stick around, in general, thanks for bringing it up. I stick around after all of these sessions in case someone wants to, mention something one-on-one or whatever. So yeah, I'll stick around after this, and we can talk. I'll also just remind people, I'm recording all these sessions, so if you miss something, or if you come in late or you get kicked out, you can go and check YouTube later. I always post it on my YouTube site right after we have these little chats. Do people want to talk about anything about that before we look at some of the material?
I have a question, Dr. Levy.
Sure.
Is there a time frame? Is there a time frame do we on to shift the class to a pass-fail thing? That pass-fail thing.
Good question. Yeah. So as far as the timing, I'm still waiting for. I think there's an official word about that quite yet. I did sit in on the meeting. There was a big meeting last week where it was voted on by by like certain committees and things like that. Anyway, people voted on it. I was sitting there listening to it. And I think based on what they said, I think the policy is going to be that you can change that anytime until the end of the semester. And so the semester is going to be extended, or there's not like a final exam period anymore. It's just going to end on May 13th. And I think anytime before that date, you can switch between pass fail and not pass fail. There'll be an email with, I think, more details about that, but it's not something you need to do.
I got that email and just read it. It is to May 13th. You are correct.
May 13th. Okay, cool. So May 13th is the day you have to decide that. So, if you wanted to like see how things go, maybe see how the next test goes, for example, you can still gauge that and make a decision. I was going to say something else there, but no. Oh, the drop deadline has also been extended until I think April 17th, if I'm not mistaken. It's probably also in that email. So look out for that. Other thoughts or things you want to talk about related to that? I'm happy to talk to you one-on-one, but if there are things on your mind. If we choose the pass-fail route, does your passing final rule stand? So the passing final rule is going to be a policy. And listen, if you can convince me that it's a bad idea for some reason, I'll reconsider. But I personally think it's a good idea to encourage people to actually to do the work. Some people are going to be in calculus next semester, and it's important to me that people who move on to calculus have learned something from Precalc. And so I think if you're doing the work and you're passing the course on your own, your own two legs by yourself, you're going to pass the final. I give reference material on the final. I'll probably let you take a note sheet in. Like, it's not something that you should be overly concerned about if you're doing what you should be doing. I'm trying to deter.
Note sheet for the upcoming exam.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Note sheet for the upcoming exam.
I will give you some reference material related to trig functions. And so let me say something more about the upcoming exam. Let me just finish my thought about the final. If you're doing what you should do in terms of like doing the homework, and if you study for the final, you're going to pass. The only people who should be worried about this are maybe the one or two people who are thinking they might just be able to sort of look up answers and move on from this course without learning something. I'm just trying to avoid that as much as possible. That's the only reason I'm trying to do it. I'm not trying to punish anyone or stress anyone out. It's really not something that if you're doing the work, you really shouldn't be concerned about that. Let's talk about the next test, though. So I'd like to do the test. I mentioned this last time, and maybe we can vote on it tomorrow officially. I'd like to do the test like the week of April 20th. And it's going to be, I mentioned how we're going to do that last time. It's going to be like a live in sort of over video chat thing where I email you the test, and I'm going to ask you to actually write your answers down and then take a picture and send it back to me. And so I'd like to do that the week of April 20th. And if anyone has a preference on what day we do it, whether it's Monday, Wednesday, or Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, maybe we can officially decide that tomorrow. I'll post all kinds of review. I'll get you very much prepared. You'll have reference material. You're going to do well on this, I think. I think that's all I was going to say about the test. So the question was, will we have a cheat sheet on the test? And the answer is, I will give you some reference material, and what reference material you'll get, I will tell you by the end of the week. I'll post all that stuff on Blackboard. Okay, keep the questions coming. What else are you guys thinking about before we look at some trig stuff? Anything else here? Okay. Please chime in again if you're interested in talking about it. I really am happy to. So I got at least one question about trig graphs, and so we can look at a homework question. The material that you were supposed to watch today was related to inverse trig functions, but since the trig graph question comes first, let's look at that. And I'm happy to answer other questions from that homework if you want. So let me change over to my document camera here. And this is the question that got emailed to me. Again, let me know if you have other questions, if there are other problems, excuse me, that you're not sure how to start, if you're having issues with, we can look at those too. So on this trig graph problem, you're being told that you have a cosine graph, and then you want to do these 4 transformations to it. So you want to move it left 3, up 2, you want it to be vertically compressed, and then you want it to be vertically flipped. And so let me just sort of write down the general form of a cosine transformation. So it would be like, let me remember the letters we used. It was A cosine K x minus B plus C. And each one of those things does something to the graph. And so there's 4 things here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And each one of those things might do one of those transformations. And so A, and this doesn't matter whether it's cosine or sine, these 4 things are still true, right? And so the A part is vertical thing, so it's vertical stretch or compress. Or it can be a vertical flip if it's negative. And so that's what we're thinking about for A. The K part is the horizontal things, and so the K part does the same thing that the vertical thing does, but A does, except horizontally. So it does horizontal stretching or shrinking. Or it flips it. And then the B and the C do vertical and shifting, or vertical and horizontal shifting. And so the B does horizontal shifts, and the C does vertical shifts. And so that's what this section was all about, the graphing section, that is, right? This is the graphing question. And so it was all about figuring out which parts of these equations do what. And so can I clarify something about that first? I know I said this in like the notes, and we went over it a little bit last time too, and I'm just not sure if there's one part of that in particular that's a little bit confusing or something I can clarify before we look at the answer for the specific one. Because I definitely ask questions like this on tests. I put, questions that look very, very similar to this homework question on tests sometimes. So can I clarify something about that at all? I actually just got a new microphone. I just remembered here. Let me, I'm going to switch the mic. If this is any better. Let me know if this is any worse or better. I'm hoping it's a little bit better. But if it's worse, let me know. Any questions about that so far before we finish this one? Okay. Yeah, so go ahead.
So when K does a horizontal flip, does it do that when it's negative or when it's negative as well, like A does?
Yes, exactly. So vertical flip happens when A is negative, and horizontal flip happens when K is negative. Exactly, that's right. And so like on this one, if we want to flip it vertically, we're going to want to make A negative. If we wanted to flip it horizontally, we would make K negative. That's exactly right.
All right, thank you.
And so to sort of finish this one then, if we want it to move to the left 3, that means that B should be -3. If we want it to move up 2, that's controlled by C, right? And so up 2 means C is 2. If we want it to be vertically compressed, that means we're changing A, and we want it to be less than 1 to compress it. And so this tells us that A should be 1/7. And so the 7 comes from the fact that you want it to be compressed by 7. And then the vertical flip comes from the A as well. And so A should be negative. And specifically, it should be -1/7. We want it to be 1/7 from the third part, and it should be negative to make it flip. And so the final answer on this one would be plugging all those things into the formula. So A is -1/7. We have cosine. Let's see, what didn't we do here? We didn't do anything with K, right? So K didn't change, and so K is just normally 1. And then we have x minus b. B is -3, so it's going to be x minus -3, which is going to end up being a plus. And then let's see here. I think I need another parenthesis. And then c is plus 2. And so just to be clear here, you have a double negative on the inside. So it's really minus 1/7 cosine of x plus 3, right? The double negatives cancel into a plus. And so that's the final answer of that one. Thoughts about that one? Let me take a quick look at the homework section here. So the person who asked me about this one had made k equals 7. And so the k does horizontal stretching and shrinking, but we wanted to do a vertical compression. And so a should be 1/7 in that case. So the person who put this in had everything else right, but they switched the sort of the function of the a and the k. So I hope that helps the person who asked that. Hopefully they're listening. Are there other questions about this one in particular? So just kind of looking through the homework here, most people haven't started these homeworks that are due on Wednesday, which is certainly your choice to do, but I'd like to help you in these sessions, and I can only help if you've started them. So is there other questions about ones that people have looked at, or questions about the notes in particular, specifically that people are interested in looking at? You know, as I mentioned before, you don't have to, like, I know you have a lot going on, you don't have to do all the homework ahead of time, but it might be good to just page through the homework and say, like, oh, this one looks particularly hard. I don't know how to start this one. Maybe I'll ask about that. Again, totally up to you. I'm not trying to force you to do anything you don't want to do here, but I think that would be the best way for me to help. Anyway, though, what else can I help about? Is there anything about the notes that you want to talk about in particular? The notes were, so for this particular day, were on inverse, tangent, and let's see, what was it? Inverse, tangent. Oh, and some of those formulas. And the formulas aren't too bad, right? Is that what this is? Supposed to be inverse tangent and area of a sector, right?
On page 58, in the section of area of a circular sector,
Yep.
like problems A, B, and that word problem that you gave us to solve. You said we can't use like a graphing calculator on the exam, but like how do we like solve like for question B, which came down to it was 144 over 5 pi equals r squared, and it'd be equal r equals plus or minus square root of 144 over 5 pi. How do I do that with that calculator?
So just leave it as it's written. I'm trying to find my notes here. For some reason, I've misplaced page 58 and 59 here. But to answer your question, if you had something like this, so you said this was on page 58, is that right?
Correct.
And can you tell me the answer one more time? It was r squared equals...
R squared equals 144 over 5 pi. That
Okay.
just applies to, obviously, r equals plus or minus square root 144 over 5 pi.
Right. So you square root it. You get plus or minus, but you just take the plus one, right? And so it would be like this. And so you should just enter it like that. Like, just leave it right like that. And first of all, you can, you don't need a graphing calculator to do this. Any calculator, you can divide 144 by 5 pi, I think. Most calculators have pi buttons. But you don't need a number, right? So you can just leave it right like that and get full credit. You can put that into web work. You can leave it like that in a test. Putting into a calculator is just another step that you don't really need to do, basically. So I would just leave it right there. I do see that sometimes in people's homeworks when you're doing things online, you're trying to like get some decimal answer, right? You put this into a calculator and you get some like long decimal thing that's got a bunch of dots. And then the thing with that is WebWork sometimes wants 2 decimals, sometimes it wants like 4, and I literally can't control how many it wants. And so instead of trying to like get a decimal answer and taking it another step, just put this right in there, and it'll take that because this carries all the decimals with it, right? You don't have to like round anything when you enter something like that in. So hopefully that clears that up. Other thoughts? Okay, so it would be nice tomorrow if you would have thought about when you want to do that test. So our next test is basically just going to be like a trig test. It'll be on all the trig sections, and the last trig homework is due on April 15th. And so I'd like to do a test the following week, on the week of the 20th. If you have a preference for the day, for one reason or another, maybe just let me know either via email, or if you come tomorrow, you can voice your opinion. But we can set a specific date for that tomorrow with any luck. I'm going to stick around here, like I mentioned before, to chat with anyone who wants to chat. And I'm around all day. So let me know if you want to set up another meeting when you start working on stuff. And if you start, might behoove you to look at some stuff so that we can chat tomorrow. And I hope to see you guys tomorrow at 11. Thank you guys for coming by.